Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com. Today is October 4th. It's Saturday. And I've done a few videos where it got me to thinking. I mentioned in a recent video that whenever there's something that's about to hit the fan for you know who, there's a distraction. There's a convenient distraction. Either his first wife falls down a flight of stairs, or somebody's red-drummed, or that he keeps spewing stuff out so that we're constantly trying to deal with the things that he's blasting out there, to avoid us from looking at what's obvious. And so I was starting to think that SOB is going to end up dying to get out of, if it finally comes down to him being held accountable, he'll probably die and get out of it, And for some of us, him, although nobody wants to see another person die, and nobody's an advocate for that, certainly not I, but there are people who just want to see him expire. But there's others of us that say, no, we want him. We want him not to expire because that's his way out. We want him to be held accountable. So I thought I would really like to put it to the universe, if the universe is willing to share the information, things we might consider regarding this question. Is he likely to expire and be the ultimate Teflon Don and avoid all earthly consequence? Or will he live long enough to be disgraced, absolutely disgraced? The question is, well, not the question, but the thing is, he will never, if he dies before he's given punishment on earth, I don't think in his head it'll ever compute that he was a disgrace or anything like that. And I think he really thinks he's going to heaven, because I think he really thinks that he stopped 7 wars and whatever other sanitized story he tells himself. I think that's, how he thinks he's going to heaven. Apparently he believes in heaven. Can you imagine? But so my read, this is ambitious. I'm going to do my signature spread. And I say it's ambitious because it's a lot of cards to see whether or not a person will live long enough to be consequenced here on earth. But I'd like to see how the rest of his life plays out regarding either passing beyond before his term is up, or living long enough to be punished. Probably the way he'll wiggle out of that is, all of a sudden his children will step up, and all of a sudden they'll actually care that their elder father is now being abused, right? And so then they'll probably step up and say, oh, but he's got dementia and he can't serve. That's cruel and unusual punishment to put him in prison because he's obviously in the throes of dementia. But they didn't care all along. At any rate, let me flip the camera and flip some cards. And I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but I'm using my beloved Mitelli. And bear in mind that within the week or two, I will be having another Mitelli. In 1803 or 1805, another publisher, I think, used the Mitelli plates. Of course, it's a Terracino, just like the Mitelli was. And I think his name is Baratini, something like that. Marco will be publishing it. And use the plates, because it's identical. And the only exception is that cards 2 through 5 will be the 4 Moors, because 1803 or 1805, whatever the date is obviously after 1750. And I think 1750 was the turning point for the 4 Moors, particularly in Bologna. Okay, but back to the question, which was, will he live to be punished? Or will he somehow escape earthly punishment? And we know who we're talking about. So we have the seated emperor. He is the big shot of the two emperors. Remember, 2 through 5 had been replaced with like the standing emperor, the sitting emperor, the standing pope, and the sitting pope. The ones that are seated have the more power. So we have a very powerful individual on the world stage, secular, who's looking away from everything that follows. So we have the page or valet of swords. They're looking in opposite directions. And then we have a regrum, which could be seen as a regrum. Mitelli would have understood that this image was being used for the Hanged Man card. This little dust bugs me. I have like selenite and it flakes. So it's interesting because we have a card that's traditionally used for the Hanged Man, but it also shows a regrum. And it also shows punishment. So it's ambiguous what it could be representing. But we have a world leader with a lot of power in denial of what's going on over here. And the minions aren't looking at him anymore. They're focused on that. So they're either focused on punishment or they're focused on a regrum. And we have 4 swords. Front and center of the core 9 regarding this issue, we have the Ace of Batons. So we have energy, force, a burst of something. And we have Moon. We have Diana, the huntess, right? The huntress. Is that a word? The huntress? So she symbolizes the moon, and Mitelli chose Diana, the goddess of the hunt. A regrum hunted. But remember, the question is, will he live to see earthly consequences for his behaviors? Here we have the standing emperor. Has a little less power, but he's still an emperor. Fortitude. And 2 swords. So the only the only like pip cards that we have are all from the aggressor suits, from the suits that have weapons. We have the page or the valet of swords up here. We have 2 swords. We have 4 swords in front and center of the core 9. We have the aggressive hand of the batons, which is very interesting. So there's no cards of the earth or land or money or the practical realm. And there's nothing regarding the emotions. It's all force, 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 energy, 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 energy. Power, power, force, literally fortitude, right? And then a regrum or punishment. And then we have a card of mystery. So are we getting the answer? I think we have to depend on the quint cards. What do you think? This addresses a life of force, aggression, right? But does it answer the question? Let's pull the quints. Alrighty, so I had to supplement the quint cards with my little Mitelli that Shell David was nice enough to create for me. So we see that there are 2 cards that are repeated in the spread, which we have to take a look at. We have 2 fortitude cards, And then we have 2 lightning bolts or tower cards. Now, in this first row, there was a little bit of ambiguity, right? You know, is there punishment, or is it, you know, he's turning his head away. Okay, let's take a look at these cards. These top cards. He's turning his head away. Could this be a subservient or one of his followers or whatever? They're not looking at one another, right? And then we have, this guy is focused on this. So could it be that his minions or his people, his subordinates, are no longer supporting him but looking for punishment? Or are they focused on the distraction that gets him out of the situation? Well, that's interesting because the quit card for it, in case we missed it, is getting struck. And whenever I see this card, and I've always said it since the first day I ever laid eyes on it, if I'm lying, may God strike me dead. You know? If you hear somebody else saying it, they probably saw it on my channel, right? So to answer the question, I think, yeah, he does live to see punishment. I think he does. Or he's aware of his disgrace. He will be aware of it. He'll be in denial of it. He's looking away. But his minions are focused on either the punishment or the distraction. But this card is a card that suggests disgrace because it's coming from the divine. It's lightning. May God strike me dead. But there's ambiguity there too, because is it the divine justice that he's got to worry about? But I think the question was clearly articulated. Earthly justice, right? Earthly consequence. And although he looks like he's in denial, or maybe his brain will be so fried that he's not aware. And that would be the ultimate escape for him. But his minions turn their back to him, and they're focused on his disgrace, or they're focused on punishment, which is very interesting. Because that would be a card of subservience, you know, that they don't have to be children or anything like that. Okay, now the ultimate card is fortitude. So there's strength, there's force. Now I mentioned that the only cards of pips are all forceful suits, right? We have weapons. They're all weapons. Okay, now this one's not engaged, but this one, we have 4. So it could be considered peace or calm during a break in aggression. Falls under him. Falls between these two. So this could be suggestive of if there's new leadership, right? If there's like he's the cult figure, right? But if there's a new figure that's brought in, maybe there could be like a period of peace or a truce or a period of calm. So even though these are weapons, they're steady, right? But front and center of the core 9, we still have aggression or the beginning or the spark of something, right? And we have mystery, secrets, hunting, and deception. And we have the moon and deception, the magician card, together. Now I see this as the Pied Piper, and there is a story of the Pied Piper. Now he's not, he doesn't have a pipe or a flute or anything like that, but he is getting people to follow him. He is getting children to follow him. And there is a story. Look up the historic story of the Pied Piper. All these children disappeared. A lot of kids disappeared, centering around this story of a Pied Piper, who is kind of what he is. This guy is, but he's playing a tambourine. But there was something dangerous regarding this guy and kids. So maybe the punishment that will come, maybe the punishment that will come will be regarding, that might be the thing that, the e-files, okay? That might be the thing that really gets him. That might be it. That just might be it. And man, if he lives long enough, they'll pretend that he's not with it in his head, or that would be the ultimate. That would be the ultimate escape, or the ultimate diversion, that he's so lost it in his own mind that he doesn't really live to be consequenced with it. You know? Oh, man. But I do think he goes down in flames and disgrace for the thing with the kids. And then we have, the moon next to the magician card. So that's a double whammy of deception. We don't have the devil card, which would really seal it for corruption. But I think he lives long enough to absolutely be aware of his disgrace, even if he turns his head and is in denial of it. He becomes irrelevant. The people aren't looking at him, and the people aren't looking at him anymore. They're more focused on punishment and consequence, for sure. It's very, very interesting. And fortitude, why does fortitude show up twice? Well, fortitude is a virtue, right? Finding out what you're made of. Integrity, right? When fortitude pops up in a read, it could, as I suggested, be a reinforcer for brutality or force, right? These cards are all weapons, right? These pips. So it could support that. But it's also a card that it's a virtue. It represents what you're made of. What you go through something, you find out what you're made of, right? So and the country will find out what we're made of too. It'll be a moment of truth for all of us to bring him to justice. Or even in disgrace, even if he's dead, to make it abundantly clear that we're not sugarcoating his presidency like we did with the Civil War, erecting statues of Confederate traitors. Can't make that mistake again, because in 100 years we're going to have the same problem, or less, because all the ugly statues and the tributes put together for him as a what's it called when the second, there's a girl in a beauty pageant that she just kind of gets the prize for being Miss Congeniality, right? It's like the lesser prize, right? It's not the big prize, but it's like Miss Congeniality, right? So they can't give those kind of prizes out after he's done. So the country has to be held accountable as well. And the country has got to find out what it's really made of as a result of him leaving. So it's very, very interesting. Under new management, right? Reestablishing who we are, working together, keeping peace after the old regime. But they can't work together too much with the disgraced party. There can't be any miscongeniality prizes. It must got to be called out for what it is. And he's got to be disgraced. And if they want to put him in they want to bury him in his little library in Florida, go ahead. Florida's going to be underwater in 100 years anyway, so let them have it. Let them have them. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be brave, and be kind.